This is kind of the conversation. I'm Chris Toast, and this is an opportunity for you to hear from individuals within the county or individuals throughout the community. We think, or nonprofits, whatever it may be, agencies that we bring in and we have conversations about what's going on in their departments or in their agencies or nonprofits. And so, welcome. As always, this is Facebook Live. You can also go to our website or our YouTube channel or Spotify and listen to any of our shows. I think this is our 8th show. We will continue to add more, and so that you have a true, real, clear opportunity to understand what county government is about, and you have the opportunity to ask questions during the show. So today joining us is Todd. He's the Executive Director of Southwest Regional Planning Commission. And I wanted to have Todd on. First of all, welcome. Thanks. And I wanted to have you on just because when people hear that, they may not have any understanding of what that really means.
There's a high likelihood.
and so I wanted to have the opportunity to have you talk about it, talk about some of the programming that's going on, and just go from there, and maybe learn a little bit about where you come from and what got you into planning, and go. But let's start off with Southwest Regional Planning Commission. What is it?
Yeah, so, right. Not many folks have heard about us, and I'd say we get probably at least one missed dial a week for folks trying to find Southwest Community Services, which is maybe another organization that has already joined you on this podcast in the future. But we're not generally, our profile's not very visible to your general resident in the Monadnock region. But just to give folks a feel for who we are a nonprofit public organization composed of 33 member municipalities in the Monadnock region. So all the municipalities in Cheshire County, Western Hillsborough County, and one town, Langdon, up in Sullivan County. And our mission is to provide guidance and technical assistance to those municipalities on a wide range of public policy issues, everything ranging from transportation to housing, land use, economic development, and more. And what that looks like in practice can vary as well. So one key aspect of our mission is connecting local government and partner organizations with resources. Mm-hmm. So similar to the county in some respects, providing that channel of connectivity and communication between folks living in our individual communities and higher levels of government, like our friends in Concord and in Washington, D.C. And I think that's a really important role that we play, especially for our smaller rural communities that are really volunteer-driven, right? Local government works because people step up to volunteer to serve on their select boards, their planning boards, zoning boards of adjustment. And many of our communities have not much in the way of staff resources. If you're a community of 2,000 people, 1,000 people, 200 people, you don't have someone on staff that can be researching grant opportunities, understanding which might be a good fit for a particular project, coordinating with state agencies and so forth to figure out how to fix that broken bridge or that bridge that's at risk of failing, to figure out how to revise land use regulations in order to facilitate development of the housing the community might need in order to support its workforce or its seniors or all of the above. So that's one key role that we play. Since planning is in our name, that's much of what we do. And in practice, that looks like working with planning boards on developing and updating their master plans, which for folks who aren't familiar with your local master plan, It's essentially a strategic planning document, a vision of what your community will look like in the future, and that document helps guide the development of local land use regulations, so zoning, subdivision regulations, things that often can cause folks' eyes to glaze over a bit when you bring them up, but they are really important to in how a community looks, who can live there, what sorts of housing is available, what commercial activity can occur. Really fundamental to the day-to-day experience of community members, whether they're aware of it or not. So that's some of what we do. But we since we're a small shop of about 10 staff people, we're based in Keene. We work in a wide variety of subject matter areas, and our team of professional planners are really skilled and able to pivot according to the needs of our communities. So whether it's issues related to housing or economic development or transportation, we've got a really talented set of folks who are there to provide support.
Yeah. So how many regional planning commissions are there?
So there are 9 across the state.
Okay,
Sure. Yeah.
And out of those 9, do the regional planning commissions reflect? Is there standards that you guys go by, or is it standards and a reflection of the catchment area you're in?
So there is. We are authorized under state law. So New Hampshire RSA 36 is the one that gives towns the ability to form regional planning commissions and to voluntarily join a regional planning commission. And the statute provides some guidance and guardrails as far as what our mission entails, but in many respects, it depends on the priorities of the region and the communities, and that's where we take our direction from as far as what we're focusing on.
Okay. In the catchment area, it's all Chester County, as you stated. Some in Hillsborough.
That's right.
Which is probably the Peterborough area.
Peterborough, Temple.
Yeah. Okay, and then Antrim,
yes.
and they just got plopped in there. Did they get carved out, or they asked to come?
No, every town that is a member has asked to come. We have seen some fluctuation among border towns, which RPC they elected to choose, but it's remained relatively consistent over the years.
So you can't regulate, but you can assist in towns, municipalities to develop regulations and statutes and ordinances, whatever it may be, to govern their towns, and you assist with that.
That's correct. We have zero regulatory authority.
Yeah. I like to say the obvious sometimes,
Yeah.
because sometimes people may not understand that what you're like you said, a lot of times, like what we try to do is we bring people together. We don't have to lead, but we can bring people together on a topic, or we can coordinate with you. And that leads us into the first area, because I think the partnership that was developed some years ago has probably had one of the biggest successes that we've seen across the board, that is broadband.
Yep.
And that broadband. And at the time, Southwest Regional Planning Commission reached out to us and said, "This is what we'd like to do," and we sort of partnered together. You took the lead on it, but we were there supporting that too. And out of there, you can explain what came with it. But I will tell you, for the listener's sake, 5, 6, 7 years ago, or whatever time it was now, that when Banana Broadband started, we were seen as one of the least connected, last mile connected counties in the state of New Hampshire. And today, we've gone full circle, and now we're one of the most connected counties. It doesn't mean that work's not still, and there's still work to be done that, we'll continue that. But we couldn't have done that without Southwest Regional Planning Commission really leading that conversation, that discussion, and how there came heroes like Brian Roscoe from Chesterfield and others who really took that ball and ran with it and gave us some ideas that led to legislation. I'll let you talk about it even more.
Sure. Yeah, and frankly, the work that agencies work on broadband predates my time at the Planning Commission, so I got on the bandwagon at a certain point along the way. But you're right, about 5, 6, 7 years ago, broadband was at the top of, it seems like, everyone's list as far as things that were affecting our economic prosperity and our quality of life here in the Monadnock region, yet towns that were, their options were limited to copper-based DSL connectivity, which is unreliable, slow, really can't support the high-speed functions that folks are looking for today. And it was unclear 5 or 6 years ago what exactly the pathway towards improved connectivity would or could look like, due to our sparsely populated areas and the fact that we're a rural region. It just didn't make economic sense for the private sector to build out cable or fiber connectivity, and so we needed creative solutions to help incentivize that. And the Planning Commission's role, really from the beginning, was to, along with partners like the county, was to convene folks in local communities as well as state agencies to talk about what the challenges are and what some possible solutions could look like. And that's the role that we often plays, in addition to assisting individual communities, just being the instigator, so to speak, and the facilitator for folks, in Chesterfield and Fitzwilliam and Hinsdale and all of our communities to have cross-border communications and conversations. And so we helped organize the Monadnock Broadband Group, which served that function as a place for folks to gather to talk about how are we going to solve this thing. And one of the outcomes of those conversations was legislation sponsored by then Senator Jay Kahn in the New Hampshire Senate to allow and clarify municipalities' ability to issue bonds for broadband infrastructure build out. So to debt finance broadband infrastructure network construction. And one of the first communities, or the first community in our region to take advantage of that option was Chesterfield. And you mentioned Brian Roscoe, who was really instrumental in that town, and really paving the way for the whole region to figure out this new legislation's on the books. How do we use it? Like, how do we take advantage of it? And Brad in Chesterfield, along with a private internet service provider, figured out a really innovative public-private partnership that would allow a private entity to take advantage of a town's ability to issue bonds for broadband infrastructure, while at the same time protecting the taxpayer. So the town would be taking on debt, but the private internet service provider would be paying down that debt. So it's an interesting way for a town and a private vendor to come together to take advantage of the incentives and advantages that go along with municipal bonding, along with the private company's ability to build and manage a high-speed internet network.
Yeah, which has been sensational. And I will, on just a quick note, Mayor Kahn, who was then at the time State Senator Kahn, was really the one who brought that legislation forward and pushed it through to get it passed. So we owe a debt of thanks to him for the work he did on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Did you have a question?
I do actually. So not to take away from the Southwest region, but someone was asking who would they contact for Concord if you have that information.
That'd be Central Regional Planning Commission.
You know, the name makes sense.
Yeah. There you go. Thank you very much for the question. And as I always said, more questions, less I have to speak. So that's all
There's
I'm
a lot of people watching, so we might get one.
Well, good. So, you know, and I want to talk a little bit about too, and this is something that you and I have talked about. You know, we just witnessed last night. We all waited for what we were going to wake up to in Florida, and you know, talk about how we are prepared up here. Is there emergency mitigation plans in the towns? How, you know, what's the role of Southwest Regional Planning Commission? Is there more that you can be doing? You know, I know that we've talked about it. We're working with the director of Homeland Security, Rob Buxton, to take a look to see if there's more that the county can do to support our community to ensure that if that day ever happens, where that level of crisis happens, that we have processes in place locally. We understand that FEMA and others may come in and do what they need to do, but that locally we are as prepared as we possibly could be. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways that the Planning Commission works with communities on preparing for the worst, for disaster. One way is we work with towns to develop what's known as local hazard mitigation plans, which is a framework that is set up by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, as folks might be familiar. And it's essentially a process where the town looks at various types of hazards like flooding, severe heat, hurricane, ice.
And we had that a few years back.
So there's a whole list of different types of hazards that towns look at through this process. And Southwest, we typically are often work with towns as a contractor to help them step through that process with their emergency management director. Most all towns have an emergency management director, and as well as others in the community that might represent particular departments in local government, or might have a connection with vulnerable populations in that community that might be particularly hard hit if a disaster were to occur. And we look at, all right, these are the different risks that that exist or could exist in your community, and here are some specific measures that you could implement in order to mitigate that hazard. So, and flooding is a big piece of that. So, looking at your most recent flood maps and understanding how many structures are in your floodplain, both in the 100-year floodplain as well as the 500-year floodplain, because I think as there's growing recognition of we're seeing these 100-year floods more than once a century. So the threat of severe rainfall and flooding is increasing. And looking at how do your local land use regulations mitigate hazard from flooding? Are you creating buffers between rivers and water bodies and where folks can develop? Are you targeting more upland areas for development versus those that are in the floodplain? So that's one way that we work with towns. And those local hazard mitigation plans are important for communities to have in place, not only because it helps you think about what your threats are and what your vulnerabilities are, but FEMA requires towns to have one of those plans in place in order to access grant funding through other programs that might help them implement certain projects to mitigate their risks to hazards. So FEMA, they want to see that you've gone through an intentional, thoughtful planning process before you ask for funds to say reinforce or expand a culvert or help address flood risk in a variety of ways.
Okay. So I'm going to jump around.
Okay.
I'm going to now. I want people to get to know a little bit what brought you into the planning world. What interested you into becoming working with an agency like Southwest Regional Planning Commission, and then now here you are today, executive director.
Yeah, well, I always joke that no one grows up saying I want to be a planner. So,
I can see that. I was on the planning board for the city of Keenan. It's one of those things where it's like, how long is my term?
Right. So, and it's actually an issue that we have in the state is that it's not a career pathway that is known. But the way I found planning is actually my previous career. I managed an organic farm in Peterborough.
Okay.
And before that, I did some work in the conservation world. But I had a kind of a interesting or non-conventional farming arrangement where I was leasing land at a co-housing community in Peterborough, essentially a homeowners association that clustered development on a particular portion of a property and left the remaining portion open for farmland and forest land. They're intentional about how they build community within the neighborhood. So I leased land and worked with the neighborhood on really starting from scratch what farming at New Benusa neighborhood and farm could look like. And at the same time, I was leasing land from the Wells School in Peterborough. So similar in some ways, different in others, but really needing to work with community to figure out how to manage, steward, and use land for the mutual benefit of the farming business, for the neighbors, for the general public. And that required a lot of consensus building, a lot of communication, dialogue, certain design activities, just figuring out how do we lay out a farm on a particular piece of land. And so that brought together a lot of activities that I actually find myself using in my job today. I'm spending less time on a tractor at Southwest Regional Planning Commission, but
And it's awesome.
yeah. Not in my professional capacity, but but in many ways, there's a thematic through line there that remains part of my day-to-day. It's working with all different sorts of people who have very different ideas about what their community could and should look like, and figuring out how to arrive at a consensus that helps the community move forward to achieve its goals.
Okay. Well, I didn't know that background, so that's great. So I'm going to jump back now to other things that you're doing. Now you do some level of work in brownfields. What does that mean?
Right. So a brownfield is a property that either has actual or perceived contamination of some kind. Think of the abandoned factory or car wash or any sort of underutilized property in your community that just looks...
Many of our factories that have been here, like Kingsbury and others, that there may be issues with some level of contamination.
Right, exactly. Okay. And so the Planning Commission has one of the longest running regional brownfield assessment programs in the state, going back, I believe, to the 90s. And what that program does is it works with communities and property owners to assess brownfields to figure out, okay, we think that there's some contamination here, but what actually exists as far as noxious materials And sometimes through that process we find out, oh yeah, there is significant contamination, and other times it's more, there might be a development opportunity, and the developer is getting feedback from their bank or lender, like, we don't want to contribute funds to this project because we're worried about contamination. If we can assess that and determine that, oh, in fact, it's not as bad as it could have been, that can help smooth the pathway for development projects to occur. And a good example of that is the railroad property in downtown Keene, where the Monadnock Food Co-op is currently located. I wasn't here when that was what I've heard described as just like a dirt pit, or
We call it the dirt parking lot for free.
Yeah. So I never experienced that, but it's kind of hard to imagine actually that given the activity and really the what exists there today, the planning commission being able to play even a small role in that, I think is meaningful. And
just on a side note there, because I say this, I've said it many times, but I don't think people really understand the strength of or the heartbeat of the city of Keene is downtown. And it should be in any community, it should be downtown. And you can have it that you're one building depth or you're going to deeper depth. And what happened, what was allowed on Cypress Street, where the food co-op is, and we're on Railroad Street, where the hotel and the other buildings are, is it created depth. And it led to Roxbury Street being redone. And it just strengthens the downtown when you have depth to your downtown, and it's not just one building wide, that's it. So that, I think anywhere, so if there's brownfields there, and I remember where Southwest Community Service put their on Water Street, that building right there, Robert Hart building was there. It was a shoe factory, tanning factory, so, and I know that they were able to, and this would lead to the next thing, they were able to get funding, federal funding, brownfield funding, and I think Southwest Regional Planning Commission had a big play in helping them with the paperwork and with the process to do that. Is that something you could do?
Yeah, that's a role we do play in with many communities and partners, is help identify particular funding opportunities, help crafting a proposal, reviewing draft materials. Where we're particularly active in that respect is with our community development block grant projects. For folks who aren't familiar with that, it's a program through the U.S. Housing and Urban Development, and it supports projects ranging from infrastructure to housing and public facilities, with the aim of supporting economically disadvantaged households. And to give folks a few examples that are underway right now, so the Roosevelt School renovation up on Washington Street in Keene, the Community Development Block Grant Program is part of that funding stack, and those funds are flowing through the county. That's a county sponsored project. So emblematic of the fact that I think our two organizations work hand in hand on lots of different projects.
Right.
And the Base Hill Housing Cooperative in Keene, we're working with them to totally overhaul their drinking water system.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Installed back in the 1960s. It's way past its useful lifespan. It's leaking. It's inflating water bills, and they were recently awarded some funding to that program.
All right, I'm gonna keep moving on.
Yep.
And there's really three more areas I really want to hit upon. One is your data, your mapping, your GSI, which you need to explain what GSI stands for, but and because I wanted to hit transportation housing.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the fire with data.
Yeah. So we bring data to the table. Our team is well versed in the wide range of data sources that are available through federal agencies, state agencies that help support and plan for projects that there may be anecdotal information like, oh, we need more housing, or oh, we have folks that are struggling with transportation in our region. We bring some quantitative rigor to that discussion, and that's important in making your case to local decision makers, state decision makers. Funders want you to bring data to a proposal, so it's not just anecdotal information. And so we're a resource in that respect, and folks do call us up from our member municipalities saying, hey, I need some information on the number of job openings in the region and how that might stack up with the number of available housing units. So we just want to get a picture of how many housing units have been built over the past 5 to 10 years, and how many we'll need over the next 10 to 20. And regarding GIS, or Geographic Information Systems, is what that stands for. That basically means mapping, so spatial analysis and mapping. And we work with towns to develop maps for funding proposals or for their master plans, or you mentioned local hazard mitigation plans earlier, but planners, we like to print out big maps and roll them out on the table, and that can really ground discussion about, say, where development can occur, where it can't occur, where are there links in our transportation network, where are there gaps. Having a map really adds to that discussion.
Okay. And do you do other like population trends or any other gathering of information like that?
As far as demographic projections, we really rely on Office of Planning and Development to do that work, but I will say that the last time that they updated those projections, they consulted with all the regional planning commissions to weigh in on whether the assumptions were realistic or not. So we do have to play a part in that process.
Do you put numbers together on economic viability in the area, in your catchment area and things like that?
Yes. So one way in which we do that is we develop what is known as a comprehensive economic development strategy, or SEDS, because we love acronyms. And that's the framework established by yet another federal agency, the U.S. Economic Development Administration, and similar to other topics that we work in. It's a strategic plan that lays out what are some of the economic trends that we're seeing, what are folks working on to address challenges, what are strengths we can build on. And so looking at things like wage growth or job growth, economic security.
Comparing to other counties or other catchment areas?
Comparing to other counties, or the state as a whole, or the country as a whole. So, there are various ways of defining economic prosperity and success, and so laying out the different ways you can measure that. The one that you see in the national media, GDP growth. Many folks don't feel that on the ground, so making sure that we're looking at other ways of measuring economic prosperity, like economic mobility, and the ability to work your way up the income spectrum. That's key, I think, to many folks' conception of the American dream. So understanding how feasible is that for someone who's born into a less advantaged community or household? How possible is it for them to work their way out?
Housing. What is something the Regional Planning Commission looking at around housing? It seems to be a lot of groups out there. How do you not duplicate? And what are the concerns you're seeing? Anything you want to hit on housing?
Yeah, well, we need more of it. And really for all segments of the economic spectrum. Folks at the lower end of that spectrum are feeling the crunch more than the rest of us, but really everyone who might be looking to move here is having a hard time finding housing. And one way the Planning Commission is working on this issue is partnering with our member municipalities to look at how land use regulations affect what is possible and what is not possible to build, and whether changes need to be made in order to accommodate the types of housing folks are looking for. And typically that means smaller housing units. We're seeing at both ends of the age spectrum, whether you're an older person or a younger person, they're often looking for the same type of housing. So smaller, single floor living. I can tell you as a new parent, single floor living is amazing. Not having to schlep a stroller up the flight of stairs, and access to amenities and services. Both age cohorts are looking for that, and in many cases, it's not possible to build that type of smaller unit in a way that the market can support.
Okay. All right. And then transportation.
Yeah.
Where do we stand with transportation?
Well, there aren't many. If you don't have a car, there aren't many options available to you unless you live in Keene or in North Swansea, or Hinsdale does have some access to transit. But
Is it Brattleboro?
yeah, the mover
Yeah.
from Brattleboro comes into Hinsdale. Has a few stops there. So as our population grows older, the number of seniors, those age 65 plus, that group's projected to double over the next 20 years. The 85 plus population is projected to triple over the next 20 years. And some of those folks will be able to drive, but many won't be able to drive. And many folks are looking for living situations where they don't need to drive. It's expensive to own a car. It's expensive to maintain a car. That's a huge cost savings to a family if they can drop from 2 to 1 cars. And so I guess the main one project that I'll mention that we're working on right now is a feasibility study to look at what a regional transit entity could look like in the Monadnock region. And that's building on some prior work we did with a consulting firm named VIA to look at a variety of scenarios for what transit could look like in the Monadnock region and in particular areas of the Monadnock region, looking at both bus service as well as a new form of public transportation called microtransit, which is essentially Uber or Lyft, but public transit. So instead of a bus on a set route and schedule, you have an app where you dial a number, you schedule a ride either on the fly or in advance, and get picked up where you're living and you get dropped off where you want to go. And we got some pretty solid numbers and an understanding of what that could look like as far as how many vehicles you would need, what would the startup costs be, what would the operating costs be, and the whole in the equation right now is who would run a transit.
Yes.
Service like that.
It's a serious process. Yeah, and there would be a partnership on some level, I would guess, with the Department of Transportation and the state of New Hampshire too.
Yeah, it would require partnerships locally as well as with the state and.
Well, I think the biggest issue there is that people need to understand in talking just Cheshire County, but I can also talk in that region too. We're a rural community, and so when you have a rural community, you have isolation going on. And it means that, and with what you just said around the numbers around aging, yes, we all know that that New Hampshire is in the top 3 of aging states, and that Cheshire County is in the top 2 of aging counties. And so we have a real issue that we need to take care of, because there are people that, for whatever reason, whether they can't afford a car, whether they aren't able anymore to drive a car, or whatever the story may be, they are now locked into whatever they are in their area. And in some levels, if we don't have that level of transformation, it puts a heavy burden on the city team, because people are going to come where they can live a life.
Yeah.
And so, we've got to address housing. We have to address transportation, and there's no real easy fix. And I would say this is a generational issue. This is going to take years for us to figure out. But in the short term, there's some level of ways that we can come up with, or ways that we can come up with that at least band-aids it enough that we start doing that. We started that with the community kitchen. We were able to, the county was able to give them some money to pop up community kitchens throughout the county. And it made a huge difference to the point they're coming back this year with a whole plan on how to strengthen those areas moving forward. So they're not having to do that, and they can be in partnership with these smaller pantries and support them on level and help move them forward to do this more with their communities. So, this is just housing and transportation at just another level that I was talking to someone yesterday about. That there may be monies out there for you to, if you own a house and you could take an elder in, that you may be able to, benefit from that, but more importantly, benefit from the individual moving in with you, and the individual benefits from socialization of being in your home.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways that we have to look at all of this as we move forward. So what else did I miss? Because I know we're probably shooting getting down on just about 5 minutes left. I don't want to not hit certain things that I should have hit upon. So what other things are there out there that I need to be thinking about here?
I think we hit on all of the many of the top of mind issues, and many of them trace their way back to housing. I do think, but economic development. I mean, I think the biggest constraint on that is housing.
Mm-hmm.
It's no secret that there are job openings here in the region and in important sectors like our schools and hospitals. I think that's really a message that we try to communicate clearly. It's like, even if you aren't personally experiencing housing insecurity, you have a roof over your head, the housing issue could still be a life or death issue for you. Because if we don't have the hospital, if we don't have the medical staff to treat you in ER if you have an accident or a medical emergency, you don't want to be waiting for 2 to 3 hours. So it affects all of us, and I think folks are starting to understand that.
And I also know there's a lot of work being done around childcare. And that's something, I don't know if you guys, you probably sit on some things.
Yes, yeah. The Planning Commission, we don't have direct involvement in the childcare issue, but I know Manatee Economic Development Corporation, I serve on their board.
Right.
They've got some really innovative programming to help homeowners retrofit their homes so they can start home-based daycare businesses.
When you guys list public health, what's that mean?
So we work with Cheshire Medical Center on development and updates of their community health improvement plan. The Center for Population and Health over there really does a good job of thinking about how what's known as the social determinants of health affects the well-being of our community. So a lot of the things we've been talking about already: social isolation, transportation, housing. So, looking at those issues through the lens of public health. But yeah, one example of a partnership with the hospitals is right now we are offering a complete streets improvement grant opportunity where towns can request funds to help either develop a complete streets policy, and by complete streets I mean streets that are accommodating to all users, so folks on foot, bike, car, transit. So we can work with communities on developing a policy or design guidelines. We can work with communities on building complete streets facilities, and we're working with Checker Medical to make that opportunity available.
And because there's about 2 minutes left here. Yeah, I was reading one of your programs that you've done in the past, and is Monadnock Region Parks and Play. Is that something where you work to help identify the regional opportunities in our parks and introduce it to tell the story of where you can go out and play?
Exactly. Yeah. So taking an inventory of what parks and other recreational facilities are available across our region, using our mapping and GIS shops to help create an online interactive map that allows folks to explore those opportunities, and also to help communities and the region better understand where there might be gaps for certain users, like how many trails do we have in the region that are universally accessible to folks who might want to enjoy the outdoors, but they're using a wheelchair.
Is that something like if I look on there, I can find where to play disc golf?
That's a good question.
It's an up and coming. Yeah, it's not even up and coming. It's here.
Yeah.
Or a pickleball court or things like that.
Yeah, I don't know if we get into that level of resolution, but maybe we should, because it seems like everywhere I turn my head, I see a pickleball court.
Well, yeah,
I haven't played personally, but
it's actually fun.
Yeah.
But it would be something I think to partner with Monadnock Collaborative, because I think it's an economic engine it's tapped, but it's not tapped as well as it could be. And so if people knew the trails and knew that you could start at Dean and go up to Allison's Orchard or wherever it may be that you wanted to get to, or go down to Winchester or whatever it may be, and come back and go back to your hotel and enjoy the downtown or whatever it may be, however you wanted to attack that. But also, you know what? I want to just get away, go up to Keene, play a little pickleball, or I heard that they've got some great disc golf at Surdup Dam or wherever it may be that they have it. I think somehow we should partner that. That's just another part of telling the story.
Yeah, it gets better and better. I drive past the new skate park that's going in Keene and a bike park, and there's examples of similar stuff happening across our region.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time today. I know you have a busy schedule, so taking an hour of that and coming in and talking, I think the community will be better served.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
All right, that's been our episode this week for County Conversations. Again, I'm Chris Todd. We've been talking to Todd Warner, who is the Executive Director for Southwest Regional Planning Commission. I'll be back next week with another story from Cheshire County. Thank you.